All right, guys, so today we're going to look at setting up your footage for blocking. So we want to prepare it so that it's the correct frame rate and so that we have the frame count visible on your footage. And this is something you'll want to make sure you absolutely do just so we can ensure that you have proper timing when you start blocking out the animation for your final. And so Haley was kind enough to let me use her footage, and so we're going to import that here into After Effects and start preparing that for, again, our blocking. So once I have After Effects open here, I'm just going to close this splash screen, maybe. In the top left-hand corner of the project panel, I'm going to double-click, and we're going to import our footage. And so hopefully we're working off of the M drive here. And we'll bring in our footage. Once we bring this in, I'm just going to left click and drag the footage down into the timeline below. This is going to automate or automatically create a composition for us. Now before I do that, I do want to correct some of the settings on this footage. So if you expand the project panel and take a look here, it's going to show you a couple things about your footage. So one, it's going to be the frame rate. So if we look at the frame rate of this footage, it looks like it was recorded at 30 frames per second, but in Maya we animate at 24 frames per second, so we want to correct that. It's also going to show you the duration, so it looks like it's about or approximately 4 seconds long in duration if we look at the out point here. So it's pretty simple to fix the frame rate. All we need to do is right click on the footage, go to interpret footage and select main. And then where it says conform to frame rate, I'm going to go ahead and select that option, and then we're going to tell it in this options box here to be 24 frames per second instead of 30. Once we have that set up, I'll hit OK, and then if we double check the frame rate column here, it will now read 24 frames per second. And then we can drag it down into our timeline below, and the comp that it creates with this footage will assume all of the settings of the file itself. So let's left click and drag this down below, and let go of left click, and I'll hit 0. All right, so that's our footage. Let's go ahead and let's add the timestamp to it. So I'm going to make a new layer here. If for some reason the new layer option is grayed out, just get out of that menu, come down here into your timeline and select your footage. And then if we go to layer, new, this should be highlighted now. And let's go to adjustment layer. And then with this adjustment layer selected, I'm going to go to effect. Let's go down to text, and we're going to do timecode. And then let's reposition this. So I'm going to put it somewhere where it's not going to be visually distracting or in the way of the performance or action there. Here for display format, let's change this to frame numbers. Let's see, I'm going to increase the text size here just so it's a little easier to read or see. And then here it says time source. We can either do layer source, composition, or custom. What's really important here is that it starts at 0 seconds or wherever your actual animation starts. So let's see. It looks like Haley's not in screen until approximately 30 frames or 30 seconds in. And so what I'll do is I'm going to take the footage, and with this selected and with my current time indicator, I'm going to scrub through until right before Haley comes on screen. I'm going to select this layer, and then on my keyboard I will hold Alt and the beginning bracket. And what that's going to do is it's going to trim everything to the left of my current time indicator. And so it trimmed that footage, and then I will scoot this down and have it actually start at frame 0 down here. And then if we hit 0, our frame count should actually start at the beginning of the action. Then I do want to double check this just to make sure that the frame count matches up. If you hold control on your keyboard and while holding control, left click once on the time here in the top left hand corner of your layers panel, it'll switch from time to frame count. And then I should be able to scrub through this, and whatever this time count reads here in my footage, it should match the time count here in the layer panel below. And so this is something you'll absolutely want to make sure it matches. You do not want to have to come in here and start doing math. It's like, well, the frame count doesn't add up, so I'm going to, maybe this pose will be 12 frames after whatever this frame count says it is. Don't do that. Just make sure you get it right the first time. You're going to save yourself a lot of time in the long run if we're not having to calculate, how many frames this should be from whatever this certain point in time is. So do make sure you take the time to set this up and get your time count set up correctly. And so I've got this all framed up. It starts at 0 frames here. Like I said, we could come to time source, and if we set this drop list to custom and then expand the custom list, we can actually tell it the number of units to go by. So we could tell it to, let's say, go every 24 frames. I think that's right. Yeah. And so the time units is just your frame count. And then here where the starting frame's out, we can actually offset this. So let's say on this particular frame, I want the frame count to start at 0. So let's say this is where I want my animation to start. I could take the starting frame and left click and drag on this value. You'll notice as I drag it to the right, it increases this number. But if I take it to the left, so if we go negative with this, we can offset this. And now at this particular point in time, I could have my animation start here at 0 frames. And then if I were to slide through here, at the beginning of the footage, it's now negative 24, but that's not really where I want my animation to start. I want it to start where maybe Haley comes on screen somewhere right around in here. So you can offset this if you need to do that as well. But I think I liked it the way I had it before, so I'll do Control Z, and I'm going to undo that. Just make sure your frame number here starts exactly where the animation should begin. And I might actually change this a little bit here. Okay, so once we get that queued up, we've got our frame count adjusted and starting exactly where we need it. I'm going to take the work area here and reduce it to just what I want to render. Again, you can change the work area. If you look above your timeline, there's the time ruler, and it's sort of bookended by these light blue bars. And I'm going to take this one here on the far right hand side and left click and drag on this, and I'm going to have this end wherever my footage ends, so right there. We'll go ahead and drag that in, and once we render, it should only render what that work area sees, so it'll cut off these last 30 frames or so. And so once we get this queued up and ready to go, let's go ahead and export this. So I'll go to File, Export, and we're going to export this with Media Encoder. So I'll go ahead and hit Add to Adobe Media Encoder, and we'll wait an eternity for this to load. And eventually the job should pop up here in my queue. So just got to be patient with it. All right, Now, I do want to format this a little bit, so I'm going to click on the encoding here where it says H.264. It's going to bring us into the settings. For format, I'm going to leave it at H.264, so if it isn't set to this, just click this drop list and click H.264. Where it says presets, I guess it depends on how you recorded this. I'm going to leave it at match source because it looks like it was recorded in portrait view on a cell phone. Normally, so if you have something that's filmed in 1080 HD or something to that effect, I would actually click the drop list and come down here to like Vimeo and select the Vimeo setting that corresponds with how it was recorded, so like 1080. But yeah, because it was set to a cell phone, I'm just going to go ahead and hit match source. Output name, this is just, if we click on this, it's going to ask you where to save it and what to name it. And so I'm going to save it to the M drive. So we'll go ahead and name it and hit save. It's up to you if you need audio or not. I suspect that we probably don't need audio with your reference, so I'm going to go ahead and, where it says export audio, I'm going to deselect that unless it's really vital to your reference for some reason. And then we can just hit OK here in the bottom right hand corner, and then up in the top right hand corner here, I'm going to hit this sort of green play button here, and it's going to encode our video. So like I said, it's absolutely imperative that you get this framed up correctly, have your frame count start where the actual animation starts, and that this footage is 24 frames per second. If we don't do this, the timing on your animation is going to be off. If you don't have the frame count on there, again, you're going to be sort of counter animating against yourself, and just make sure the frame count is there and starts exactly where you want the animation to start, so you don't have to do any kind of math. And then let's hop into the M drive and take a look here. We've got our footage. If I right click on this, I would recommend that you play your footage back with QuickTime. So if I were to right click and go to open with, we're going to open it with the QuickTime player. Now the reason why I recommend the QuickTime player, it's probably of all the video software, it's the easiest to go frame by frame, and we can also make QuickTime also go into a frame count. So if we hit yes, we'll go ahead and open this. In the bottom left hand corner there is a time stamp, so it's going to tell you where you're at in time. But if you left click on this, you get a drop list, and we can set this to frame number as well. And then this number should correspond with the number that we put here for the time code. And then if we were to use the directional arrow keys left and right, in the bottom right hand corner of our keyboard, we can frame by frame this. Excellent footage. And now we've got our footage all set up with the time code and ready to start figuring out where our blocking poses are for our first blocking pass. So I'm going to stop here just to segment the videos, and so you'll have one video just for setting up your footage. Like I said, I would not skip this step. It's absolutely vital. And then in the next video, we will look at finding your blocking poses for pass 1.